Welcome, everyone. It's my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome everyone to this book launch for Jill Long Thompson's newly written book entitled The Character of American Democracy. I want to also remind everyone that a recording of this session will be posted online. And if you have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Now, in a moment, I'm going to turn things over to Jill, but before I do, let me say a few words about my friend and my colleague, Jill Long Thompson. Jill and I have actually known each other for a very long time. You see, we were both students in the doctoral program together. There's so much I admire about Jill, not the least of which is how she manages to never age. She really must tell me her secret sometime. But what I admire most about Jill is that she is the consummate Renaissance woman. It's hard not to be a member of her fan club, given that she has managed to weave together several careers successfully and effortlessly. Jill was born in Warsaw, Indiana, and raised on her family's farm. She earned her undergraduate degree from Valparaiso University and her MBA and PhD from IU's Kelley School of Business. But even before her doctoral degree was finished, Jill began her political career on the Valparaiso City Council, a post she held from 1984 to 1986. In 1986, she became the first woman in Indiana in either major party to win the nomination for U.S. Senate, a race she lost to the incumbent Senator Dan Quayle at the time. 3 years later, in 1989, Jill won the seat in a special election in Indiana's 4th Congressional District. The seat had become vacant when Dan Coates was appointed to the Senate to replace Dan Quayle, who had won the vice presidency in the Republican ticket with George H.W. Bush. Jill's victory made national news because, you see, Indiana's 4th Congressional District was considered a safe Republican seat. She won re-election in 1990 and 1992. As a member of Congress, Jill served on the Agriculture and Veterans Affairs Committees and the Select Committee on Hunger. She chaired the Congressional Rural Caucus, and she was also a national vice chair of the Democratic Leadership Council and a speaker at the 1992 Democratic National Convention. In 1995, President Clinton appointed Jill Undersecretary of Agriculture for Rural Development, where she served until 2001. In this role, she managed 7,000 employees, a $10 billion budget, all while improving the efficiency of the department, which funded rural programs in housing, business, and utilities. Jill led the reformation of the single-family loan programs and helped create thousands of jobs in economically challenged rural communities. In 2008, Jill ran for governor against incumbent Governor Mitch Daniels. She was the first woman in Indiana history to be nominated for governor by a major party. On the academic side of Jill's career, she taught at Valparaiso University from 1981 to 1986, and in 1995, she served as a fellow at the Institute for Politics at Harvard's John F. Kennedy School of Government. From 2003 to 2007, she served as a CEO and senior fellow at the National Center for Food and Agricultural Policy in Washington, D.C. And in 2009, President Obama nominated Jill to the Farm Credit Administration Board, and she was officially confirmed by the U.S. Senate in 2010. She served until 2015. In November 2012, she assumed the role of board chair and CEO. After this, Jill returned to IU, where she has been teaching in both the Kelley School of Business and the O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs. And in 2017, Jill joined the board of directors of the Conservation Fund. These highlights from Jill's amazing career as Congresswoman, Undersecretary, board member, and professor explain why I refer to her as a Renaissance woman. And now we add book author to her many accomplishments. With the publication of Jill's book, The Character of American Democracy, she engages us in a conversation about our democracy at one of the most pivotal times since the early 1860s. But rather than make this point myself, I'd like to read a paragraph from Jill's book. A strong United States of America is important to the well-being and security of the world, not just in the best interest of those who live here. Our country is an amazing experiment in democracy and capitalism. What we do and how we do it have significance around the globe. We must remind ourselves every day that our businesses, our governments, and most importantly, our people can be a model for a stronger, safer, fairer, and better world. Anything less fails to uphold the vision our founding fathers had for our nation. Building and maintaining character are critical to our future. It's not possible to do so, however, unless there is a shared understanding of what it means to have character. I think now is a great time to see a brief video about the author of these poignant words, Jill Long Thompson.
Jill is the consummate public servant.
And she understands the kind of struggles that working people go through because she's lived it.
Her analytical capabilities are stunning.
She's the type of leader that a state such as Indiana is in desperate need of.
I was born and grew up on a farm. I learned on the farm the value of hard work and honesty. It was taught in our family that your life is not about you, it's about what you contribute to the world that you're a part of. I feel very fortunate that I have spent my entire life in northern Indiana, and I had an opportunity to teach at Valparaiso University and serve on the city council there.
She was the first person in our family to go to college, and I looked up to that, admired that.
And then she wanted to get her master's, and then that wasn't enough. She wanted to get her doctorate.
I went on to Indiana University for both an MBA and then a PhD in business.
Jill Long Thompson really caught our eye in the special election of 1989.
Her first race for Congress, nobody thought she could win. When that seat that had been held by Dan Quayle for a number of years.
We all had a lot of doubts as to whether or not she could succeed.
And yet she showed them. She fought, she won, and she was an excellent congressman.
And that was, I think, an overriding theme for her years in Congress. How could she use her position to help people back in the district?
Jill served in Congress for a number of years. The last year she ran in that Republican district, it wasn't a good one, and she lost. But she didn't cry about it. She decided, okay, what can I do next to make a difference?
She served in the executive branch of government in the Department of Agriculture as Undersecretary for Rural Development. As the Undersecretary, she made it a particular point to focus on the economic development of smaller communities, rural communities.
She did a great job, and a lot of people have jobs today, whether they know it or not, because of programs that Jill Long established.
She has a PhD in business administration.
She's really devoted her political life to helping improve the lives of ordinary Hoosiers.
Jill has been an educator. She was in Congress. She was in the Clinton cabinet. She has a really great mix of experience to be able to bring the kind of changes that we need here in this state.
You might say she's a daughter of Indiana.
Thank you, Dean Kessner, for your kind words, and even more for your support of the book project. I'm also very appreciative of Dean Mooney's support and the support of so many friends and colleagues who are here at this launch. Thank you very much, Paul Helmke, Leon Panetta, Dan Glickman, Lee Hamilton, Marcy Kaptur, and Richard Painter. When people address you as the Honorable, those are not just words. You have all dedicated your lives to principled leadership of our country and world, and today you honor me, you honor us by being here. Writing the character of American democracy was a labor of love for me, but it would not have happened without the support and counsel of a number of people. My husband, Don, has been an incredible partner and gentle critic throughout the writing of this book. My parents, Jean and Roger, read the first draft. Today is Dad's 95th birthday. Happy birthday, Dad. And my brothers Mike and Mick were very supportive. And even one of my cousins, Cheryl Franks, provided invaluable guidance on the subtitle and the cover design. She actually wrote the subtitle. Gary Dunham, Ed Feigenbaum, Michelle Livinghouse, Christian Sauter, and Inga Smalkstus were instrumental in helping to establish the focus and the parameters for the work, and the knowledge, insight, judgment, and support of friends and colleagues, Bonnie Brownlee, Sam Berger, Kelly Eskew, Timothy Ford, Andrew Downs, Bruce Jaffe, Wendy LaGuardia, DJ Masson, William Moe, Catherine No, Joseph Miller, my dissertation chairman, Elizabeth Gingrich, Charles Rawls, Mark Sauter, Charles Taylor, Greg Udell, and Wayne Winston. You are all remarkable. Thank you. I'm also very honored and appreciative of the support of my good friend, Senator Maria Cantwell, originally a Hoosier, and I thank Cleola Brown, Stephen Williams, Michelle Curry, and Dakota Coates. Very sadly, we don't have Congressman John with us any longer, but I am so honored and touched by his support of this book. Thank you all very, very much. I'm going to begin talking about the book by reading a few passages, and I will keep this brief, I promise. Years back, while serving as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, I was walking from the Capitol to my rental apartment one evening when I ran into a very powerful congressional committee chairman. He was standing on the sidewalk in front of a quite nice and quite expensive restaurant. After we exchanged greetings, he invited me to join him and other members of Congress for dinner in the upstairs dining room of that restaurant. That invitation posed a dilemma for me. I personally respected the chairman, and his position meant that he could be very helpful in serving the interests of the people in my congressional district. But I knew that lobbyists would be paying for the dinner, and I had a personal policy against accepting anything, even a cup of coffee or a soft drink from a lobbyist. Additionally, I had introduced legislation banning members from accepting such gifts. Although the practice is prohibited today, at that time it was both legal and was very common for lobbyists to buy meals from members of Congress. So I quickly made the decision to join the chairman and his group, but I only drank a Diet Coke, and the next day I reimbursed one of the lobbyists who was co-hosting the event. During the dinner, the wife of one of my House colleagues asked me why I wasn't eating. As discreetly as possible, I told her that I didn't accept meals paid for by lobbyists, and she appeared puzzled by the response and quite casually replied that she and her husband would never be able to eat in such nice restaurants if they had to pay for their own meals. Overall, it was an awkward situation, and I was concerned that others might perceive me as ill-mannered or self-righteous. But I opposed those lobbyist-hosted dinners because of my familiarity with a study conducted many years earlier that I had come across here as a student at IU. Researchers at Yale found that people were more likely to be persuaded about a specific point of view when they were given peanuts and Pepsi Cola as they read materials promoting it than when they were given no refreshments. If people can be influenced by eating peanuts and drinking Pepsi, they are likely to also be influenced by an expensive fine meal in a nice restaurant. And certainly the airlines have figured out that peanuts and soft drinks make people more agreeable for anyone who's ever flown in economy class. Now, many of my former colleagues viewed socializing with lobbyists as a way of conducting business, but I actually saw it as a violation of the democratic principle of equal access in the legislative process. As A. Philip Randolph so eloquently said, a community is democratic only when the humblest and weakest person can enjoy the highest civil, economic, and social rights that the biggest and the most powerful possess. In democracy, I believe the process by which we adopt policy is as important as the policy we adopt. And I also believe that without ethics, democracy cannot survive. Among the principles of democracy are that people have the power, leaders are to consider the varied interests of all, there must be fairness of process and equality of participation, and there must be transparency in the governing process. It's in the Constitution, for example, that the US House and Senate have to maintain a journal of their proceedings. In the book, what I do is relate the universally accepted pillars of character, and there are 6 of them: trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship to these democratic principles. And I make the case that ethical leadership and an ethical citizenry are essential. Let me talk about these 6 briefly. Trustworthiness demands integrity and transparency. We need to be able to believe what our leaders are telling us, but there also can't be conflicts of interest. Under current law, the president and vice president are exempt from the conflict of interest law covered in 18 U.S.C. section 208 that prohibits all other executive branch employees from holding personal financial interests that conflict with their conscientious performance of duty. And when I was appointed to serve at the Farm Credit Administration, Don was required to liquidate equity shares in an ethanol plant that had borrowed money from one of the financial institutions regulated by the Farm Credit Administration. The stock was not publicly traded. He wasn't able to find a buyer, so his only option was to gift those shares, but it was the right thing to do, and we should expect no less from the president and vice president, who have considerably more power than the board chair and CEO of the Farm Credit Administration, the position that I held. Respect. One of the most insidious forms of disrespect, I believe, is voter suppression. Whether it takes the form of complicated voter registration requirements, aggressive voter purging, unreasonable identification requirements, or limited early voting opportunities, trying to get in the way of mail-in voting, for example, gerrymandering, we must demand that Congress and state legislatures address these practices that undercut citizens' rights and therefore are undercutting the democratic process. Responsibility. Government of and by the people means that individual persons are entrusted with power. We all have a duty to be informed, reflective, and ethical on matters of leadership, selection, on civic engagement, public policy, and the democratic process. And we all must work to improve information literacy here in the country. Research shows that falsehoods travel more quickly and broadly through social media than the truth, and our schools and other institutions need to take serious note of that and address the issue. Fairness. A core tenet of democracy is fair distribution of power among the people. We must reform our campaign finance system to include, among other things, a match for small donations and also something to temper the power of super PACs. Caring. Democracy can't work if we only care about ourselves. Democracy is not about me getting my way or you getting your way. It's about us finding our way forward together. We must compromise, a term that has had some negative connotations for reasons I don't fully understand, but we have to compromise and we have to embrace the diversity of who we are as a nation. Research shows diversity in organizations actually leads to better performance. We will not only be more fair, more caring, but we will perform it at a higher level. Citizenship. In the book, How Democracies Die, the authors write that we cannot merely depend on the good character of our leaders. We need norms or shared codes of conduct that are accepted, respected, and enforced. In this age of social media and technology, we need to recommit ourselves to values-based and character-based citizenship as well as leadership. I believe that living in a democracy means being a caretaker of democracy. The equation is unambiguous. The character we have as a nation is the sum of the character we have as individuals. Democracy is a shared responsibility, and we must look inward to ourselves as well as outward to our leaders and fellow citizens to make it work. We must all commit to using this democratic power in a consistently responsible way. Each of us has the obligation to understand the role that we play, one of dedication to a life of purpose, integrity, honor, and personal accountability. It is not just unethical political leaders who have the power to undercut and even destroy a democratic society. The citizenry has extraordinary power, and we have the same obligation as public officials to be ethical, to live our lives with character, and to take seriously our responsibilities of civic engagement. I conclude the book with one of my favorite quotes of the late and most honorable John Lewis. We all need to do our part to push and pull together to make a difference in our society. Democracy is not a state, it is an act. We must all stay in the continuing struggle to create a beloved community, a nation, and a world society at peace with itself. Those are beautiful words. We should aspire to them. It is now my pleasure to introduce Paul Helmke. I first met Paul when he was the mayor of Fort Wayne and I was serving in Congress, and I found him to be smart, principled, and incredibly energetic, and I quickly learned that public service was part of his DNA. Paul began his political career here at IU when he was elected student body president, a position he won by defeating none other than James Bopp, probably best known for the Citizens United case. After graduating from IU, Paul went on to study law at Yale, where he met Bill and Hillary Clinton, and they remain good friends to this day. I would like to say that Paul has always been on the right side of history, but shortly after the 1992 election, I had the opportunity to have a conversation with President-elect Clinton, and he mentioned his friendship with Paul. He went on to say that Paul had always been a loyal supporter and contributed to his campaigns in Arkansas, but he did not receive a single contribution for him for his presidential campaign. I had to mention that, Paul.
Yeah.
Paul went on to lead the Brady Organization to prevent gun violence, and it's an issue on which he continues to lead nationally. After leaving Brady, Paul founded the Civic Leaders Center here at IU, where he shares his knowledge and experience with America's future leaders. My friends, the Honorable Paul Helmke.
Well, thank you, Jill, and congratulations on the new book. I was happy to read an early draft of it last year, and look forward to having more people read it now too. It's interesting. Jill and I consider Jill a good friend, but we got off to somewhat of a rocky start. And when Jill ran the first time, it was in a special election for Congress. And she ran again, and it was a seat that I looked at running for, decided not to. I knew people didn't like politicians that just jump from one office to another office. So I stayed in the mayor's office, but my chief of staff, who'd been my campaign manager, wanted to run, and he got the Republican nod for Congress in the special election. And Jill ran against him. He didn't, a lot of Jill's ads, it seemed like, attacked her opponent by attacking me. And attacked a tax increase that I had pushed for, and attacked an annexation plan that I had pushed for. And that all makes sense politically. And I still blame David Axelrod or whoever that fly-by-night guy was that you used. But, and actually, I'm a little more upset that the Republicans told my former chief of staff to pretend he didn't, he wasn't connected with any of that. But so we start out, Jill's elected in a very close election. And I'm the mayor of the biggest city in the district, so we start working together. And I thought, how's this going to work out? She came down pretty hard on me, and she was wonderful to work with. And Jill was the congressional representative about half of the time that I was in office. I was mayor for 12 years. She was in office almost 6 years of that time. And anytime I needed to talk to her, anytime we needed anything, Jill was always responsive. And whether it was fighting for Fort Wayne's airport, or for a flood control project, or national issues like gun violence prevention, Jill was responsive. I remember one time needed to get a hold of her, and her staff got her off the floor of the House to take my phone call. And Jill, that meant a lot to me. Always appreciated it. You were there when I had concerns. You were there for our community, and that means a lot. When we'd come out with the delegation, Republicans and Democrats from the city council, county commissioners, Jill would make sure that we were treated well and got to see things and answered all the questions that we had. So Jill, you did a wonderful job as our congressional representative, but I'm just really happy that I've had the chance to work with you since that time. We'd see each other quite a few times, saw a lot of each other when you were teaching at IU, and that meant a lot to me too. I decided that Jill and I are probably a lot alike in a lot of ways, and maybe that's when we've got a tight connection. You could look at sort of the downsides of our political careers. We both lost to Dan Coates. We both lost to Mark Souder. In our statewide races, all of which were unsuccessful, at least we lost to big names like Dan Quayle or Mitch Daniels in your case, or Evan Bayh in my case. But I don't want to focus on the losses. We both won upset elections. We both won when people didn't think we were going to. And I think we won because we connected with people, we knocked on the doors, we let people know who we were. And I think at that local level particularly, people respected the values that you represented and that I tried to represent. And I think that's a lot of it. I try to have Jill in to talk to my freshmen every year because she's someone that really does set an example of what public service should be. And as Dean Kessner said, She not only was the first woman to be nominated for U.S. Senate and the first woman to be nominated for Indiana governor, she's the only woman to be nominated for either of those roles by the major party. She has been a trailblazer in Indiana for women in politics, for common sense in politics, for doing the right thing. And this book represents a lot of that. And Jill, I'm proud to be your friend and wish you all the best. This is something that everyone should be reading, especially this time of the year. Don't have anything else I want to say, but again, congratulations. And I'd like to introduce the next speaker, who is really one of the most impressive political figures over the last 50 years. Leon Panetta not only was head of the Secretary of Defense under President Obama and head of the CIA under President Obama. He was chief of staff for Bill Clinton. He was head of the Office of Management and Budget for Bill Clinton. He was a longtime member of Congress from California. Before that, he even worked in the office of Mayor John Lindsay at New York City and was head of the Department of the Civil Rights Division under President Nixon. He's got a career that goes back to the late 60s, and it's been a career that really has been outstanding. So I'm honored to be in the position to introduce Leon Panetta, and it's great that he's here to help support Jill's efforts today too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor, for the kind introduction. It was a thrill to be asked to have this opportunity to be able to join a lot of my colleagues, great colleagues, Lee Hamilton, Andy Jacobs, who I haven't seen for a long time, Birch Bayh, who I remember as a legislative assistant working with him when he was senator, Dan Glickman, who's going to be coming up soon, and of course Jill, and so many others, in coming together to pay tribute to Jill for the great work that she's done, and for this book, The Character of American Democracy, which is, I think, if there was ever a time when this kind of book is needed, it's now. I've been, as Paul mentioned, in public service a long time, over 50 years. And I'm often asked, why did I get into public service? And I got into public service really for several reasons. First of all, because it was a higher calling. In those days, I always felt that being able to work for the people in some capacity in our democracy was a higher calling. And I did it for several reasons. One, because I'm the son of immigrants, Italian immigrants to this country. And they thought it was important for their sons to give something back to this country that gave them so much opportunity. Secondly, because I was in the Army. I spent 2 years in the service. And it was a time when there were men and women coming from across the country to be part of the military. And to be able to work with a group of individuals from everywhere in the country who had their differences, different creeds, different beliefs, different races, but yet they worked together to accomplish a mission. And that sense of duty, I thought, really inspired me. And lastly, because there was a young president who said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And that inspired me to get involved in public service. And to a large extent, that's what inspired Jill to get involved as well. I can remember Jill coming in as a freshman member of Congress. She served on the Ag Committee. Actually, Dan Glickman and I both were on the Ag Committee at the time. And Jill reminded me of this, and I recollect it when she was offering one of her first amendments to a bill. And it was clear that she had no idea all the rules involved in trying to get that done. She had this this look of a deer caught in the headlights. And I remember going over to her and trying to give her some help and guidance. Sure enough, she was able to get the amendment adopted as a result. But she was that kind of person who really cared about serving the public. And she did it throughout her career in Congress. She did it when I was in the administration. When she was in the Agriculture Department, she served with distinction in trying to help people in rural America and did a great job. And now, after all of her public service, she's written something that I've termed a Bible for public service. And I think it's true. I think this is a book that really speaks to values and faith and what's morally right. And I think everyone ought to be listening to that. Everybody ought to be hearing the importance of those values. Our country was founded on values and beliefs about the dignity of human beings. And our forefathers built those values into the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. I mean, our Constitution is a reflection of the freedoms and the rights of people that are part of the dignity of humanity and something that's special to who we all are and what we all believe in. And our forefathers felt that strongly. And for over 200 years, I think this country, having faced crisis after crisis throughout our history, whether it was a civil war or world wars or recessions or depressions, somehow, thank God, we've always had leadership that was able to rise to the occasion and do what was right for our country. Today, I think all of us are concerned about whether or not those values and beliefs, that moral compass that was built into our very system is being adhered to. In my 50 years, I've always said I've seen Washington at its best and Washington at its worst. I've never seen Washington as divided and polarized and dysfunctional as it is today. Obviously, a president who's kind of unwilling to be able to sit down, work with others, unify this country to deal with the problems we're facing. And frankly, both parties, Democrats and Republicans, who are in their political trenches and not able to come out and try to work together as they should in order to deal with the challenges in our democracy. Our system is being tested as never before in my lifetime. And our system of checks and balances are being tested. Our forefathers really did not intend power to be centralized in any one branch of government. And so for that reason, they created this great system of checks and balances. And it too is being tested. And in some ways it's doing what it's supposed to do. And in other ways it can be worrisome. But I think the one thing that's being tested more than anything is our moral fiber in this country. And whether or not we're going to all stand up for what is right. Fortunately, I think the ultimate check and balance in our system is what the Constitution starts off with, which is we the people. I think it is up to we the people to be able to embrace that character that Jill talks about. Embrace what's right. Embrace the values of honesty and truth and doing what is morally right. Those are the values that the American people have to embrace. And if they do, and if they kind of pay attention to what Jill's talking about in this book about the character of American democracy, then I think all of us can make sure that the American dream, the dream that our children deserve a better life, will be there for the future. And we also can ensure that we always have a government of, by, and for all people. So Jill, congratulations on your book. And I hope that the public embraces everything you've had to say, because we need that today more than ever. Now it's my honor to introduce a good friend. We were classmates, and back in 1976, we were elected together to the Congress. We served on the Ag Committee together, but more importantly, Dan Glickman and I were close friends who worked together on many issues and who had very much the same outlook with regards to how issues should be handled and what was important for the American people. And I appreciated Dan's friendship. I appreciated his conscience about what was right and wrong. Ultimately, when I was Chief of Staff to the President, we needed a new Secretary of Agriculture. The first person that came to mind was Dan, who came from the plains of Kansas. I had worked in the Agriculture Committee and was somebody who was supported on a bipartisan basis by both sides of the aisle. Bob Dole supported Dan to become Secretary of Agriculture. So that tells you a lot. And I've continued to work with Dan in his different capacities in the movies and elsewhere. And by the way, he's got his own book coming out that tries to talk about that career, but also expresses the humor that Dan enjoys. And very frankly, we all could use a little humor these days. So I hope Dan's book does as well as Jill's. Let me introduce all of you to a very good man, a decent person, and an outstanding public servant, Dan Glickman. Tell me Dan is still there.
He is still there, but his mic, now his mic is on.
I would think you're the one that got me into the mess at USDA, but I forgive you. First of all, let me say thank you, Leon, and I see Lee Hamilton on there, who will be speaking, one of the greatest of all Americans that Indiana's ever produced. And Jill, I'm so happy to be with you. I first met Jill when we were in the House, big smile. Jill always had a big smile on her face. And the other thing I remember about Jill in the House is both of us always struggled with the votes. You know, you'd walk in and the whip would be there and the finger would be up or down telling you what to do. And Jill and I would go into the corner and say, all right, that's what the whip says. What should we do? And we struggled with issues, trying to do the right thing, and not just to follow the party line, but to try to do the right thing. And I remember, and Jill always led that career. And then we were at the Department of Agriculture together, the department that was called, Abraham Lincoln called the People's Department. And Jill ran the rural development operations, which of course is all of the rural electrification and business and industry loans and housing and the kind of things that made rural America thrive. And it was, you know, the department's often known for farm programs or for food programs. But Jill was in charge of basically putting it all together and make sure that people could live happy and healthy and productive lives on not only on the farm, but in small towns and communities all through America. And I think that's really important. Jill's book is called The Character of America. Character starts, however, with one person. And nobody has better character than you do. You know, the Bible said a good name is worth all of the gold in the world. And character is a symbol of a good name. And you really personify the fact that not only do you have personal character, but how much personal character is important for national character to be part of the American ethic. I talk a lot about humor. because I think that humor and self-deprecating humor is kind of the grease that makes a country happy and productive. And you always laughed at my jokes, but more than anything else, you always were tolerant and laughing and being careful about being judgmental. And because, you know, there were a lot of people who were tough to deal with, and both at the USDA and in Congress. And, you know, you had to have a kind of open-mindedness, and you were like that. And I think it had a lot to do with how you saw the world and how you understood. We were there as fiduciaries, always as fiduciaries to the American people. My presidential hero is Harry Truman. A lot of people don't remember him anymore, but he was Mr. Citizen, and that was the autobiography he wrote about himself. And a common man, didn't go to college, but probably was one of the best read presidents we ever had. And he came there, he did his best, and he went back home. He didn't have any money in the bank. He wouldn't take any boards of directors. He didn't kind of lobby us, because he said, you know, I came to Washington to serve the people and not to trade on my name. And it always struck me. And the other thing is that he used to sometimes use profane language, but he would always be a big truth teller. And when he'd go on these whistle-stop tours, this was particularly in 1948, they used to yell, "Give him hell, Harry." And he would reply back, "I don't give him hell. I just tell them the truth, and they think it's hell." And I always thought to myself that was that great Midwestern value coming out. And Jill, to me, you've given them hell, but you've given them the right kind of hell. And you've done what John Lewis has said when you quoted him, that you've participated in good trouble, trying to make the world a better place and do it the right way. So I'm just proud to be associated with you. I hope your book is a giant bestseller. There are all these Trump books out now. People ought to forget about them and read your book in terms of how to make the country a better place to live. And saying that, I want to introduce, I think the next on the agenda is perhaps the greatest Indianan that's ever come out of your state other than you, but somebody who I served with in the Congress, that Leon served with in the Congress, was the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, is revered across the aisle for everything he's done. And that's the great Lee Hamilton. So Lee, the floor is yours.
Well, Dan, that's quite an introduction. I'm very grateful to you for exaggerating the truth so much when it comes to my record. This has been a most refreshing afternoon to listen to Leon Panetta, to Dan Glickman, and in a few minutes to Marcy Kaptur. Just brings back for me a flood of memories of the kind of people I knew and admired and respected in the United States Congress. Somebody asked me the other day, what's the greatest thing about politics for you? And it's a simple thing. It's the people you meet. What an extraordinary view of the American character, of the American people, those of us who have served in the Congress have had. And Leon and Dan and Marcy are beautiful representatives of that. And of course, Jill Long. What a special privilege it has been for me to have Jill Long Thompson as a friend and as a colleague. Jill conducted herself in this challenging world of politics with top of the order competence and extraordinary dedication. She just doesn't talk about character and integrity. She lives it. And her example has impressed every one of us here today. I was reading some writings the other day by the Founding Fathers, and one word kept popping up. I must have seen it 4 or 5 times in the course of an hour in reading their papers. The word was virtue. And I wondered about it. I wondered if I, as a politician in Indiana, and Leon Panetta and Paul Helmke, Dan Glickman, and Marcy, I wondered if we could talk about virtue and not have our constituents kind of turn us off or maybe even laugh at us because we talked about virtue. But the founding fathers didn't laugh about it. They were very serious, and they saw that word as essential, an essential ingredient to the success of this country. And I was greatly impressed by this. Jill Long doesn't just talk about these things. She deeply cares about civility. She deeply cares about good character. It came across to me in her remarks just a few minutes ago. She cares about high ethics in public service and in public affairs. And she wants her life to be an example for others to follow. She understood the importance of character, good character in leaders, especially as they seek to be the examples they want to be by encouraging others. So what a wonderful afternoon this has been. And I'm going to remember it for a very long time, maybe not as long as Jill, but I'm going to remember it for a long time. You and I have a long list of books to read and to recommend. May I suggest that at the top of the list, both books to read and to recommend, you include this remarkable volume on the character of American democracy. I think everybody that reads it will be well served by what Jill has to say. So Jill, as one Hoosier to the other, let me just tell you how proud we are of the remarkable public service you have given to this state and this nation, and what a high honor it is for me to be called your friend. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to introduce now Marcy Kaptur. Marcy, when I first went to the Congress, there were very, very few women in that body. And most all of the women that were there because their husbands had preceded them and died in office. I don't want to be light about that, but it was a fact. And then we had a strange thing happen. More and more women ran for public office. And I had the perspective of seeing the changes that they brought to the institution of the Congress. You remember Lindy Boggs? Some of you do.
Yes.
When Lindy Boggs would walk in, she was one of the early women to come in, succeeding her husband who had died in a tragic airplane accident. When Lindy walked into a room of white men who were often using bad language and telling off-color stories, everybody improved their manners. And I respected Lindy because she was able to change the conduct, the personal conduct of members of Congress so quickly and so nicely and so graciously. Well, she was one of many women then who succeeded. And the Congress became a very different place for all kinds of reasons. We began to pay a lot more attention to children. As a matter of fact, I think that was one of the first things that impressed me when they came in and we began to talk in the Ways and Means Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee and all other committees, Agriculture, about how the policies we were working on affected children. They brought to policy in the United States Congress an empathy, a sympathy, a compassion that the men, try as we might, simply did not have in the same degree. So I have always been exceedingly grateful for the example and for the conduct of the women that served in the United States Congress. And one of those, and one of the finest of them, is Marcy Kaptur, with whom I have always had a good relationship, and I have admired her again and again as she stood up for what she believed was best for the country and in the best character that she and the other women represented. So Marcy, I turn it over to you. I think I turn it over to you.
Turn on your mic. Your mic needs to be turned on, Congresswoman. There.
There we go. I think that will work. For some reason, my finger didn't work, but Courtney, who's my able assistant here, she figured out how to do it. Thank you. I want to say Chairman Hamilton, thank you so very much. Chairman Panetta, Chairman Glickman, and obviously Mayor Helmke, thank you so much. And my dear, dear friend, Jill Long Thompson, a Hoosier who made fast friends with a Buckeye. That has lasted all these years, whether you're in Congress, whether you were chairing the Farm Credit System Board, all of the great contributions you made in a race for Congress first, that was so hard. That was so very hard. I think Jill remains the only woman from east of Gary in the north ever to be elected. Am I correct on that?
There has been one since me, but it's very rare.
Yeah, it's very rare, and I'm the first woman from Western Ohio, and so our borders join, and we understand what that territory is like. And I want to thank you for including me in this dialogue today. I really enjoyed it, and to Lee Hamilton, I always admired you so much. You were so dignified in your presence in the Congress. I served with Leon when he chaired the Budget Committee, and Dan Glickman, not only as a leader here in agriculture, but when he became Secretary of Agriculture, helped us achieve a monetization program in Lebanon. I've thought of you, Dan, so many times to move farm product to Lebanon, monetize it, and use it for reconstruction and development. We need that again. We have an administration that just doesn't get it. I just feel so honored to be here as someone who believes this to be a tome, the character of American democracy America so needs to hear now. And Jill, I wish you the very best in promoting the book. I've asked myself the question, as pundits write articles about America being in a post-spiritual culture, where our values come from. And I think you really have taken a giant leap forward in helping the country find its footing, because I think it's seeking a ground to stand on, and a lot of the institutions that we depended upon have been weakened. Those that some have been disgraced, some have been obviously aged out, and there needs to be an ethics of public life. And there aren't too many volumes that are easily readable, where there are principles that are set out as you have that help to fill this void. I think it's a really big void. And I think that the programming that we are used to today, where social media can be used to create untruth, has the American people flailing. And I think that they need anchors. And we have to figure out a way to provide them with some of those anchors. And I think your book provides a foundation for that. And I hope you see it that way. And I hope all the colleagues that are listening, I was thinking about these book evenings that the Library of Congress hosts. And David Rubenstein helps to make that happen here in Washington. I will do all I can to make sure that your book is suggested to be a part of that program, maybe in the next Congress if we can't do it this time. But it's really essential that people begin to think, Lee Hamilton talked about virtue, but to give people ethical anchors, because I do believe that many are lost at sea. And as we look at the younger generation, we ask ourselves, beyond our own families and the associations we might have there, where is there a public ethic? Unfortunately, one of the cities I represent, 4 of the city council members have just been arrested by the FBI for bribery. I can look across our country, even here in the Congress, and we look at the number of public officials that are, again, lost. They are somehow in it for the wrong reasons. And so I really enjoyed Leon Panetta's summary of why he got into public life. And you know, Leon, you reminded me of John Kennedy's call. Ask not, you know, what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. And I said that to myself during college. What can I do for my country? As someone who'd been rejected by Notre Dame University because I was a woman, by the Air Force Academy because I was a woman, and then ultimately by the FBI because I was a woman. And so I found my way without a lot of scars, but trying to help my country. And when I became a member, the first person I appointed to West Point was a woman, Latina, who went on to be a captain in the Army. And so we lived the change that we sort of dreamed about, but maybe when we were younger, hadn't, at least women, maybe hadn't fully figured out the road forward. We've all been able to do a lot, but I am deeply worried about people's motivation in public life. I'll tell you a story. When we were working on the legislation to create the World War II Memorial in Washington, now the 2nd most visited memorial in the nation's capital, it took us 17 years. And when I tell younger members of Congress that, they go, oh, don't tell me that. Don't tell me 17 years. No, 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 no. I need something tomorrow. I need something next year. You know, and I said, well, sometimes it doesn't work that way. But during the course of that, moving that legislation, which the American people wanted, there were members of Congress who tried to privatize the effort and to put money in what was then the National Bank of Washington. And like you, Jill, I'd come from Western Ohio, you come from Indiana. I couldn't believe they were trying to make money off a national recognition for the most unselfish generation. And I learned too much about motivation and poor motivation in the nation's capital here. So I just commend you so much for this. I'm so proud of you. And I hope that you continue on in these efforts. I hope you do lectures over the internet. I hope you not influence just students in Indiana, but perhaps those who are studying public life around our country. We need a whole generation of young people who will serve with the kind of noble ideals that every single person who's on the program this afternoon has uttered. And I really do think that your book provides a foundation for that. So I want to help you enlarge your audience as we can. I hope you edit this Zoom today and we move it into other circles. And I just want to ask you, as you wrote this book, obviously it took a long time. This wasn't easy to write. And it couldn't have only been that experience with that one member in front of the restaurant. What actually motivated you to spend this much time trying to put together a tome for ethics in public life? What more can you say about that? And thank you for the opportunity to appear.
Thank you. And I will answer that after Richard Pater, but I will happily answer that. Thank you so much. And
hello.
Richard Pater on?
Yes, I am.
Hello.
Hello. Well, I apologize for being on the phone only. I'm in DCA Airport in DC, and the reason is that I testified yesterday in front of the House Oversight Committee a subcommittee on operations about the state of affairs at the United States Post Office, the United States Postal Service. You probably read in the news that the Postmaster General has a serious conflict of interest with $30 to $70 million worth of stock that he owns in a company that contracts with the U.S. Postal Service to deliver mail and trucks. That there's increasingly a push to privatize the Postal Service. And furthermore, Mr. DeJoy, Louis DeJoy, the Postmaster General, is a very generous campaign contributor for Donald Trump and various Republican campaigns. But not only with his own money, but he was accused, at least, by several employees of putting pressure on them to donate to political campaigns and then reimbursing them with bonuses. This was written up in the Washington Post and the New York Times. And lastly, we have a situation where the Postal Service services are declining dramatically over the summer, and there's a lot of concern about mail-in voting and whether the Postal Service is intentionally, under Mr. DeJoy's leadership, undermining public confidence in mail delivery so people will not take advantage of mail-in voting. And this was the subject of my testimony yesterday before the committee. The politicization of the Postal Board of Governors is extreme, mostly stacked with Trump or Republican campaign contributors. I believe almost all are all white men. And it's a very political environment right now, and that's what I saw on the Hill when I was asked questions by members of the committee. The Republicans did not want to discuss with me why it's unethical for the Postmaster General to have these types of conflicts of interest. Rather, they were interested in whether I was a Democrat or a Republican. And my answer is that I was a Republican for 30 years and then quit in 2018 to become an independent because of my disgust with some other things in the Trump administration. But it was amazing, this repeated questioning where the Republican members were trying to ask me whether I am or have ever been a member of the Democratic Party. He even introduced 2 newspaper articles into the record to try to prove that I was a member of the Democratic Party. It's really quite shocking, the unwillingness of the members of the committee, at least I thought on the Republican side, to focus on the issue here, which is the politicization of the Postal Service, the conflicts of interest, enormous conflicts of interest of the Postmaster General. And then I think of Jill's book and what is the character of American democracy and how far are we falling short of what we should be aspiring to? Do we tolerate financial conflicts of interest from senior government officials? And the politicization of our government agencies, including the post office. I mean, aren't we in serious trouble when the delivery of the United States mail depends on whether you're a Democrat or a Republican? It's really quite shocking. And I want to have a dialogue here with Jill for the moments I have before I have to board my plane back to Minneapolis. What themes do you see in your book that really might help us think about how to turn this around, and particularly the situation was discussed at the hearing yesterday at the post office, the Postal Service, with financial conflicts of interest with the private sector, politicization. What would you look at in your book to point to help us think about how to solve those problems?
Well, there has to be a fairness of process, and it has become clear over the last several years that that it's very difficult politically to address what is unethical behavior, and you have to have a critical mass in the House and the Senate, for example. And I think that we have to work on introducing legislation, taking it to the public, and it would include everything from the conflict of interest provisions to fairness in elections. I think that gerrymandering, for example, is not only giving us a misrepresentation, there's a seats bonus currently for Republicans, but we also, with gerrymandering, I think are getting more extreme representatives on both the left and the right, which is making it more difficult for us to find common ground. And then we also have issues with income inequality and the mistrust that comes from that. So I think these are somewhat complex issues, but there's going to have to be a legislative solution. And I think this is a time when we're going to have to take it directly to the citizenry so that they put the appropriate pressure on Congress to make those changes.
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. The gerrymandering reminds me of the state of Pennsylvania, where I was born. And I look at the map of Pennsylvania, and it looks like a jigsaw puzzle of the oddest sort. And at the hearing yesterday, there was a congressman, I forget his name, a very right-wing sounding Republican from Pennsylvania, probably one of those gerrymandered districts, who had no interest in the ethics issues, even though I'd actually submitted a 7-page detailed letter co-authored with a distinguished professor at the University of Pennsylvania, Claire Finkelstein, outlining all of the issues, the ethics issues at the Postal Service. He had no interest in that, only interest in defending President Trump and in the question of whether I was a Democrat or not. And this is really quite shocking that these extremes are emerging in Congress, and that makes it very difficult to enforce ethics rules, which I always thought of as not being about whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or independent, but we're just going to have certain rules for government officials as to what you can do and what you can't do. And it's a very disturbing situation. I really commend you, Jill, for writing this book, because we need to aspire to something a lot better in this country. And we need to come together and stop politicizing everything. Yes. And, the ethics rules of financial conflicts of interest, it's not tolerable whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. And no president, I don't care what party, should be using the post office to try and win the next election.
Right. I agree 100%.
I really want to thank you, Jill. And unfortunately, I've got to board by plane here from Minneapolis. I wish I could join you all for longer. And you've just written a fabulous book. And let's hope people read it. And I will tweet out to my followers about your book and encourage them to read it. And just thank you for the values that you want to bring back to public service in the United States. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for your leadership on these ethics issues. And I want to thank everyone who is here today. I am incredibly honored. One of the greatest benefits of being politically active is the people that you meet and you become friends with. And I am genuinely touched and a bit emotional about the friends that are here today, the special guests, and everyone who is participating in this. It is really an honor for me to know you, and I thank you. And I'm very pleased now to recognize Dean Mooney for closing comments.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to be here with you today. Before I close, I just want to acknowledge that there are several questions that people have submitted during this discussion, and I regret that we're over time and we cannot address them live today, but we will answer those questions offline. So it's my pleasure to offer closing remarks and thanks, and certainly this is a very distinguished and eloquent group to follow. It's certainly clear that with her new book, The Character of American Democracy, Jill is going to inspire ethical leadership across the nation. And at IU, I feel that we're very fortunate that Jill inspires young minds as a professor of ethics at the O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs and the Kelley School of Business. And it's here that she has a wonderful opportunity to transform the next generation of leaders across public, private, and nonprofit sectors every day. So finding consensus, reaching across the aisle, arriving at compromise. What was once commonplace has become rare in today's politically charged environment. And Jill's call to become a better, more engaged citizenry is one that we should all accept as we attempt to move forward as a unified yet diverse country. As Jill said earlier, democracy cannot work if we only care about ourselves. Jill eloquently writes in her book that we all have a meaningful part in shaping the character and future of our nation. And at a time when public trust in our government and political systems is low, Jill has given us a clear and direct path forward. Her bipartisan approach is particularly welcome as our nation is more divided than ever by politics. The character of American democracy comes at a critical juncture in our nation's history, particularly with contentious presidential and congressional elections just weeks away. Jill's insight gives us a reason for hope, and I'm excited that everyone will now have a chance to read it, and I very much encourage everyone to read it. It was a wonderful book. And so on behalf of Jill and the organizers, the IU Press and the Kelley School of Business, I'd like to extend a warm thank you to all of our distinguished guests who gave wonderful, wonderful comments today. And also thank you very much to all the participants for joining us. There's one more thing that I have the pleasure of doing before we adjourn. And Jill, it's my great pleasure to honor you today by presenting you with an Indiana University Bicentennial Medal.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! Thank you.
And here it
Oh,
is.
it's beautiful.
I will send it to you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. The Bicentennial Medal is awarded to individuals who, through their personal and professional efforts, have broadened the reach of Indiana University around the state, nation, and world. The medals themselves are unique. They're made from materials salvaged from the old bells which hung in the student building on the IU Bloomington campus that burnt down.
Oh.
And as part of those bells, it gives the recipients a lasting piece of IU history. So the Bicentennial Medal honors distinguished and distinctive service in support of Indiana University's mission as a public university, and also recognizes individuals who've enlarged the footprint of IU or helped put IU on the map in unique ways. And certainly, Jill, your accomplishments exceed those outstanding criteria. Dr. Kessner opened this event by recounting your considerable contributions to public service. And it's my honor to present to you this Bicentennial Medal for your lifetime of distinguished public service and for your ethical leadership in service of Indiana University, the state of Indiana, and the nation. And so I ask everyone, would you please join me in a round of virtual applause for Jill?
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I am totally surprised and touched. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you.